Hello, everybody, and thank you very much indeed for coming along to this second event of the World Sustainability Business Worldwide. Our collective holds events every 2 months, and we have guest speakers at our events. And I'll introduce Peter in more detail later, but Peter Templeton is our speaker today, and we appreciate him coming along to share with us the work that his foundation is doing for young people's mental health. Today's agenda is pretty straightforward. I'll just introduce the World Sustainability Collective with a few slides, or one slide. Then we'll go into Peter's presentation. When he's finished, Peter has agreed to a Q&A session. And if you have questions that you see coming during his presentation, we would ask you to put them in the chat. Because what we will do is, during the Q&A, we'll actually just go back and go through the questions in chronological order. We will ask you to unmute and present your question to Peter, because we're on a Zoom, we're not on a webinar, so you can be interactive in that sense. So, and then we'll wrap up. We will finish at 9 o'clock, but if there's a dialogue going on, Peter has to go off shortly after 9, but we are happy to stay here till about 25 past if that's what you would like to do. But there will be a hard stop at 25 past. Okay, the World Sustainability Collective. Why did I form the collective? Was to make a positive sustainability impact right now. And we wanted to do that by uniting sustainable businesses worldwide and giving them a significant voice. And what we had in mind with giving them that voice was that these people who had already made the commitment towards sustainability could really educate and change attitudes. The general public, I think, are by and large not that well informed. There's a lot of greenwashing going around. They don't necessarily know what actually is happening, what people are really doing. And what I have as an ambition for the collective is that they can, if you like, give directly to the general public the news and the information about what they do and why. The collective is there also to encourage and support others to develop their sustainability ideas. So, you know, by having the collective and by expressing and sharing the views of those who've already made the move, we would hope to convince others to make the leap as well. We also aim to improve the performance of the business and showcase it to a global audience. And I'll talk a little bit about how we aim to improve the performance. And why are we focusing on business? Well, it's because I believe that business, and particularly those businesses who have come up with the new sustainable ideas, are the disruptors who are going to deliver that sustainable future. So what do we do? Well, first of all, we're not-for-profit organization. We are a member-driven collective, so we want people to come on board who support all the UN's 17 sustainability development goals. So it's social and environmental challenges that we see as our definition of sustainability. What we want to really sort of see is bringing together a number of people. So as I've said, we would like to bring together people who have sustainable business models already, those who aspire to have one, sustainability service providers. Those are people who, for example, can help you to define your carbon footprint and other services as well. We also welcome enthusiastic individuals like myself. We want to provide experienced business advisors, and we have already in our membership a number of very experienced business advisors who can support the improvement of business performance. And what we talk about is building business better, bigger, bolder. And what we mean by that, better is all about efficiency and effectiveness. So is what you're doing, laudable as it is it effective and efficient enough? Yeah. So, and can we improve that so that your impact is improved? Bigger is all about helping people think about how they scale and whether or not their current business model is capable of the scaling that they would like to have or need to have. And bolder is us being a little bit cheeky perhaps, but saying, well, okay, you've got a great idea, but have you really exploited it to its fullest extent? Because we want to see the impact maximized. How do we do that? Well, at the moment, we have a LinkedIn group, and that's where our membership is focused. The rationale for that is frankly just so that it's free. There are no costs associated with that. LinkedIn is a little bit awkward in terms of groups, but what we hope, once we've got a following of about 100 plus, that we can encourage people to network in amongst the membership group, to mutually support one another in whatever way is required, to share business opportunities, to have access to these sustainability services I talked about, as well as consultancy services to help you improve that business performance. And of course, we have events like this, and we also have a podcast series. And the podcast series highlights members and hopefully promotes their business through that podcast series. So if you are interested in becoming a member, then just put something in the chat box in terms of, Bill, yes, please get in touch for a one-to-one, and I'll do that, and we'll introduce you to the World Sustainability Collective. Okay, so Peter, welcome. Peter's talk is about addressing young people's mental health and well-being. As I said earlier, please put your questions in the chat and we'll address them in the Q&A that follows. I'm going to invite Peter, but hold on, Peter, I've got to get out of this in a minute. So we're going to invite Peter to share his screen, and while we're going through that, I'll just give you a brief background as to who Peter is. Peter is the founder and leader of the charity, the William Templeton Foundation for Young People's Mental Health. And this will be the focus of today's presentation. Peter is also an executive director, strategic development at IFM Engage. IFM Engage is a wholly owned subsidiary of the University of Cambridge, and its purpose is to deliver benefit to the industry and government by applying the management and policy research conducted at the University Institute for Manufacturing. Peter is responsible for developing IFM Engage healthcare practice, supporting the development of the company's strategy, and managing selected client relationships. Prior to taking up his current role, Peter was Chief Executive Officer of IFM Engage, which was formerly known as IFM Education and Consultancy Services, from 2003 to 2017, and that's when Peter and I worked together. Peter has 25 years experience in the manufacturing and manufacturing-related services business. Early in his career, Peter worked in chemical process design and operations. Subsequently, he developed a broad range of client-facing experiences with companies providing computer systems, software, and services to process manufacturing, encompassing systems for MRP2 and ERP, manufacturing execution, engineering design, and supply chain planning and execution. Peter graduated in chemical engineering from Leeds University and completed the University of Cambridge postgraduate advanced course in production methods and management. Peter, welcome.
Bill, thank you very much indeed for that kind introduction. Makes me feel very old. The topic I'd like to speak on this morning is work that our foundation has done regarding evidence-based approaches to the prevention and early intervention in depression in young people. This is work that's gone on for about nearly 5 years now, and the points I'd like to propose are, firstly, why we need to address depression in children and young people. Secondly, to propose an approach to enable prevention, recovery from depression where people have it, and to enable them to remain in remission. Then to illustrate the changes that need to be put in place by actors across the broad mental health ecosystem. So this is individuals and families, it's the health and social care system, it's organizations engaging with young people, which might be schools, employers, custodial institutions, and so on, as well as solution providers, whether they be charities or businesses, or indeed the media and social media. And then finally, outline the structure of a roadmap to facilitate progress. So those are the points that I'd like to discuss this morning, and look forward to discussing those directly with you in the Q&A session. Just building on Bill's introduction, the bits of my experience that have turned out to be quite relevant to addressing depression in young people and other mental health conditions, but we're focusing on depression for the time being. Chemical and manufacturing engineering has really been very helpful in terms of really trying to understand and join up the biological, psychological, and social research. The work that I've done at last nearly 20 years in university industry knowledge transfer, I think, is also quite pertinent. Working with the IFM, which has a big expertise in innovation management, has been really quite transformative in this work as well. And then finally, what I've called lived experience. Our youngest son, Will, suffered from depression and very sadly took his own life in April 2018. And that was the catalyst for setting up the foundation. And the purpose of the foundation is to try to accelerate the translation of research into innovations in practice and policy to improve young people's mental health and well-being. So first of all, why is depression important? Well, the scale is really quite significant. It accounts for the largest share of world's burden of disease measured by years lost to disability. About 350 million people worldwide have the condition. And in the UK, an astonishing 17 million days, working days were lost due to work-related stress, depression, anxiety, 22. So, and that's over half of all the working days lost to work-related ill health. So it's quite a significant scale. In terms of young people, the condition now occurs in about 2.1% of 5 to 19-year-olds and has risen sharply over the last 10 years or so. Although some effective treatments are available, about 80% of affected adolescents don't receive appropriate care. And even where they have effective treatment, so this would typically be CBT and or antidepressants, so SSRIs, 50 to 75% experience a relapse. And this was a key figure for me, which said, well, if we're treating it and yet such a high proportion have a relapse, there must be something going on upstream that causes that recurrence. And also depression in adolescents is associated with a much higher risk of depression in adulthood. And also it is a significant risk factor for people taking their own lives. So I think that's a pretty compelling set of factors why depression is an important issue to address. Our foundation's aims regarding depression are really to firstly try to prevent the development of first episode depression in children and young people. And the age range we talk about is from pre-life, so intergenerational factors, through fetal development up to age 25 years. Secondly, to enable recovery from depression where an individual has the condition. And thirdly, to enable people to remain in remission. And really to facilitate that, to also try to help build depression resilient communities. And I'll go on to explain what I mean by that. Looking at what we've done over the last 5 years and what we're looking to do going forward, in 2019 or 2018, after the sad situation with our son Will, Professor Ed Bullimore, who was then head of psychiatry at Cambridge, published a book called The Inflamed Mind, and that showed the role of inflammation in the development of depression. And I read that avidly, and I thought that is a fascinating insight, but it also didn't say why why inflammation actually caused depression, or indeed what causes the inflammation. And so it got me thinking, can we begin to understand the causal pathways and so on? And I began to read the research literature, and it seems that over the last 20 years, there's been a huge amount of research across the social, the biological, and the psychological factors that contribute to the development of depression. But because of the nature of academic research and also the nature of the funding, this work has to date really been very, very siloed. And so what we set out to do was to try to join up that research to understand the risk factors and mechanisms. And the first thing I did was read probably about 300 papers across the different areas and begin to say, well, can we use engineering root cause analysis? And we started by saying, well, what are the factors most closely associated with the condition of depression? And it's things like changes to brain structure and volume, changes to brain metabolites, and so on. And then we sort of worked back and says, well, what causes the changes to brain structure and volume? What causes the changes to brain metabolites? And worked back through the biological systems until we got to the individual's options, choices, and actions, and then their social and ecological context. And I came up with a straw man, and we got a project, a grant to do a project testing this with sort of leaders in each of the relevant fields, and we got them to challenge these different factors and pathways, and came up with consensus on the joined up approach. And then within that same grant, engaged about 60 people from different stakeholder groups to say, well, if those are the pathways, what are the opportunities for prevention, early intervention, diagnosis, and so on? And that then generated about 200 evidence-based ideas for prevention and early intervention. We published that in September 2021 as Changing Hearts, Changing Minds, which you're very welcome to download from our website. And then the Aviva Foundation kind of gave a grant to enable us to move from those 200 ideas into something which is a bit more focused. And so we held a dozen or so consultations with stakeholders to identify strategic themes. We then went through a robust project selection process, looking at the opportunity or impact and feasibility of the 200 ideas. And then we also looked at how do we implement these ideas across the ecosystem, and then what are the longer term research themes and opportunities. And the publication you see there is the culmination of this work, which is actually being published today, called Changing Minds, Changing Lives. And for what we've now done is identify about 45 really tangible projects that we want to take forward, about 10 to 12 a year over the next 4 years. And our next stages are to develop a small consortia, develop user acceptance criteria, identify the collaborators, define the project vision, develop a project roadmap, and where appropriate, apply for funding. And then what we're looking to do is take this portfolio of projects forward, as I said, starting at now, 10 this year, and hopefully the sort of full 45 or so over the next 4 years. Now, these are projects which are based on mature research outputs and are pretty robust. So we're confident of the science underpinning those. And then we'll also work with organizations funding research and innovation to look at the longer term research opportunities. So how does depression develop? Well, our root cause analysis work started by saying, as I said, the factors most closely associated with depression: brain structure, brain volume, metabolites in certain areas of the brain, particularly the hippocampus, for example, which is associated with mood. And then we worked back through things like neurotransmitters, inflammation and the immune system, HPA axis or the stress response system, the gut microbiome, and also genetics and how genes are turned on or off in response to the individual's experiences, so epigenetics. And then we worked back from there into individual risk factors, so food, nutrition, exercise, sleep, for example, and then underlying physical and other mental health conditions, chronic stress, early life trauma, and also intergenerational factors. And then working back yet further, the sort of broader socio-ecological risk factors, whether it's at the cultural, contextual level, the societal factors, so economic context, poverty, and so on, policies and regulation, community, organizations, engaging with young people, and also relationships. And then there's the individual psychological factors, so an individual's personal protective factors such as self-agency, their coping strategies, their perceived social support, and also personality traits. So this is a pretty complex system, but it does represent a way of looking at the development of depression, which gives us opportunities for prevention and early intervention. So looking at the individual risk factors or vulnerability factors, we've mapped out pathways for a number of areas. So food, nutrition, for example, chronic stress, for example, both of which I'll talk about now. So just laying out those 4 vulnerability factor mechanisms areas, many factors across the socio-ecological context in which an individual exists can contribute to chronic stress. Now, acute stress is a good thing. It underpins the fight or flight response to dangerous situations, but it also helps us push our abilities. But where it gets potentially damaging is if stress is sustained over a long period of time. And there is an interplay with an individual's psychological factors, but that chronic stress can lead to dysfunction of the stress response system, or what's called the HPA axis. That causes changes to brain structure and volume by causing changes to how new neurons are born in the brain and other characteristics. It can also cause inflammation as well, which is another contributing factor. So chronic stress really is a key thing that we need to be working on as a wider society. In terms of food and nutrition, again, it's a very broad range of issues that affect an individual's options, their choices, and their actions regarding food and nutrition. And there are three key areas here. One is plant fiber diversity. It seems that if one has consumes 30 or more different plant fibers a week, then what that gives is a good functioning of the gut microbiome, which produces neurotransmitter precursors and other psychoactive chemicals, which are necessary for good mental well-being. And what we're seeing is where people are consuming fewer, so say 0 to 5, that has a very adverse effect on both the gut microbiome functioning and also mental well-being. The second area is the balance of omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. Ideally, the balance should be about 1 to 1. In the UK at the moment, we are consuming a ratio of about 20 to 1. And this is largely caused by the increased adoption of seed-based oils over the last 20 plus years. And the effect of that change in the ratio is that it causes changes to the permeability of cell membranes, which as a consequence leads to increased inflammation, which is a contributing factor for depression. And then the third area is micronutrients. And by that, I mean vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients, which are present in the vegetables, fruit, other minimally processed foods. And part of the challenge here is that we as a society consume a huge amount now of ultra-processed foods. In the UK, children get about 65% of their calorie intake from ultra-processed foods, which contain much, much less micronutrients than minimally processed or fresh foods. And those micronutrients are very important across a whole range of factors, from gene expression through the gut microbiome, stress response system, inflammation, neurotransmitters, and brain functioning. So these are what we understand to be the key issues with regard to food and nutrition. So what we have then done is develop an approach and projects to address depression. Now, over the last 30 years or so, or even before that, the main focus has really been treatment of the condition. But it's clear that there will never be enough clinical psychologists and psychiatrists to treat the vast population that we have with depression. And what we need is a balanced portfolio of innovations across the care stages. So perhaps, for example, changes to government policies in areas that would be what we call primordial prevention. So that's policies that prevent the upstream risk factors, or really equipping people with knowledge and information so that they can really help themselves. But the idea is to have this balanced portfolio from prevention, early detection, diagnosis of not only the condition, but also the underlying causes, so that we can then help people to develop a personal plan for both the management and the treatment, not only of the condition itself, but the upstream factors that cause it. And so from the work we've done, the consultations and the workshops, we've identified three key themes. Firstly, information, education, and training for individuals and their families, for health and social care, and for organizations engaging with young people so that they understand at an appropriate level, doesn't need to be really detailed, particularly for individuals, but at an appropriate level as to what the risk and vulnerability factors are and what they can do to mitigate their own vulnerability factors. And then for organizations engaging with young people, for them to know what they need to be doing, for example, with respect to food and nutrition and so on. And then with health and social care, that this really has implications for public health, for primary care, and so on. So information and education are really key. Secondly, risk assessment or vulnerability identification and mitigation, early detection, diagnosis of causes, diagnosis of conditions. And then the third area is prevention, management, and treatment, which looks at, for example, options, choices, and actions around food and nutrition, exercise and sleep, underlying health conditions, so things like inflammatory conditions, comorbid condition, physical conditions such as epilepsy, which are associated with development of depression, looking at psychological factors, and also the socio-ecological factors, which might be addressed most effectively by policies and regulation. So how we went about this was defining the unmet needs and projects, and we used an approach called needs-driven innovation, where we define the problem to be addressed, the target population, and the desired outcome. And so, for example, in the problem, this problem might be individuals are not aware of what causes depression and how to minimize their risks. And target population might be young people, parents, and carers. And the outcome is that individuals are able to make informed choices to reduce their risk of developing the condition. And what we've done is, for each of the priority projects, define the unmet need, where it fits in the care stages, and also example projects. So if we take, for example, organizations engaging with young people, so schools, universities, employers, and so on, in the main, these organizations are not aware of the vulnerability factors for depression and the steps they can take to reduce them. So it might be policies, it might be food, it might be culture, hiring considerations for high stress roles, and so on. The target population would be leaders and responsible managers of these organizations, and the outcome that we're looking for is the prevalence of depression in young people within the organization is reduced. A couple of example projects looking to develop training, tools, and resources to educate key people in the organizations on the vulnerability factors. And then secondly, to develop materials such as templates configured for the specific organization to support the development and implementation of those policies to promote and sustain good mental well-being within the organization. So that's one example. Another would be in vulnerability assessment. And this is addressing the problem of patients with comorbid physical conditions, so chronic diseases or conditions such as epilepsy or rheumatoid arthritis, for example, is another pro-inflammatory condition. And at the moment, these patients are not appropriately risk assessed and managed with respect to good mental well-being. The clinicians they engage with are specialists typically in their condition, say epilepsy, but the mental health aspect isn't considered. And so what we're looking to do is enable young people with these chronic conditions to be supported to make informed choices and reduce their risk of developing the condition. And so this would be mental health, the project would be mental health training for clinicians caring for patients with these chronic conditions, and pairing that with development of disease-specific management plans and tools and so on, so that they can identify and address individual specific vulnerability factors. And then food and nutrition. Time and money are perceived as barriers to eating to support good mental health. A target population here is young people, parents and carers. And the desired outcome is that families have the capability, the motivation, and the opportunity to eat to sustain good mental health and reduce their risk of developing depression. And so a couple of example projects here, we're looking to work with industry and retailers to develop and promote lower cost foods for mental well-being. So specifically foods that are good for gut microbiota, and minimally processed convenience foods, for example. And also developing online resources to support families to make these dietary changes. So those are three examples of the projects. So in terms of next steps, we're taking looking to take 10 to 12 of these forward in 2023, identifying collaborators, developing the user criteria, and then developing the project vision and roadmap, and acquiring the funding for that. And we're just at the point of developing a very exciting collaboration with the Jamie Oliver Group on a food and nutrition project, which is looking really promising, and that'll be our first one going forward. Then moving on to, well, how do we take this forward to build communities that's resilient to depression? So we've said that what we want is a balanced portfolio of innovations across the care stages. And then I think what we need is innovations that are applied at scale across the mental health ecosystem, which begs the question, of course, what is and who are the mental health ecosystem, who are the actors? What we've identified is that there are five broad stakeholder groups engaging with the individual. Most obviously, families, carers, friends, organizations such as schools, the health and social care system, solution providers. So this might be charities, industry or businesses covering a whole range of areas, also media and social media. And those are what we call the direct actors. So the organizations and individuals that a young person would engage with. And in the black text in the boxes gives examples of those. In the outer circles, we have organizations that engage indirectly. So, for example, local authorities would have a bearing on health and social care, for example, but they don't engage directly with the young person. Similarly, researchers, funders of research and innovation, policymakers and regulators, both at national level and indeed at the local government level. So there's a whole ecosystem here with clearly identified actors. And what we have begun to do is for each of the actors within those stakeholder groups to define a vision for what we would like these actors to be able to do in 10 to 15 years time. So this is a 10 to 15 year vision. And I won't read all of these, but if we take, for example, personal prevention, our vision is that individuals, families, and carers should have a highly simplified but nonetheless sound understanding of how depression develops, and for their specific vulnerability factors, they have the opportunity, the capability, and the motivation to take practical steps to help both themselves and those around them. And on the personalized plan and management side, that those individuals would have, again, the opportunity, capability, and motivation to recover from depression and remain in remission by having a personalized plan that can help them to manage the upstream risk factors that are causing their condition. Looking at organizations, for example, employers, what we'd like to see is a whole organization approach to mental health being adopted. So, for example, training of staff in sustaining their own mental well-being, covering the range of issues that I described earlier, to minimize stress, chronic stress, two things. One, a positive culture that helps to prevent bullying, but also job design, leadership, and management that helps prevent chronic stress and burnout. Physical health and safety, but also support for members of the organization to help them manage individual vulnerability factors. And again, within primary prevention, that employees would have the opportunity, the capability, the motivation to manage their addressable risk factors. So access to mentally healthful meals, access to appropriate tools and resources such as for stress management, opportunities to engage in preventative activities such as exercise, support to minimize substance use, and also access to training and resources that gives them a simplified but sound explanation of how depression develops, the addressable risk factors, and practical steps that people can take to help both themselves and their families. And then looking at health and social care, we've produced these visions for public health, primary care, secondary, tertiary, and also social workers. But here, essentially what we're looking to do is encourage and try to facilitate the shifting of addressing depression and its development from secondary care, just focusing on, if you like, the condition, to primary care, where there's much more focus on prevention and identification of individuals who may have particular vulnerabilities. So coming back to the epilepsy example, and then helping people to prevent the development of the condition, early detection, diagnosis, not just of the condition, but also diagnosis of causes, so that an individual can understand their particular vulnerabilities and the things that are causing their condition, and address those upstream factors. Then the final point is research. As I said, we've got a near-term portfolio of innovations that we want to take forward, but longer term, we would like to see research in particular areas to underpin future innovations. And I won't go into the detail of that now, but that's in the report that we're releasing today. And then roadmap to facilitate the progress. Well, we started this journey in 2018, and I said at the time it's a 20-year vision, or a 20-year project. And what we're setting out to do near term is begin the development of this portfolio of innovations to address things that people can do across the care stages, across the themes of information and education, assessment through to diagnosis, and then prevention, management, and treatment. What we need is research to underpin the future innovations and implementation. And that would cover biological research, psychological research, socio-ecological research, but also really importantly, how do we better translate this new knowledge and understanding into innovations and enable behavior change at the personal level and also the organization and system level. And then what we'd like to see is those innovations are applied at scale across the mental health ecosystem, from policy and regulation through the media and social media, through health and social care organizations to individuals, families, and friends. And as a consequence of these things, really making a big shift in individuals' mental well-being, but also the economic and social impact. And that's my presentation. Sorry, I've taken a few more minutes than I anticipated, but I hope that's been interesting.
Peter, thank you so much. It's really an amazing piece of work. You and I sort of were there when you first launched it, and I thought then it was quite an undertaking, but you've made so much progress. I mean, the depth and detail supporting the projects in order to go forward and identify and provide and deliver solutions is truly impressive. So thank you for sharing that. And I hope that the World Sustainability Collective will be able to help sort of raise awareness of your foundation's work in the coming weeks and years. So thank you for sharing that today. We'll take questions now. So Yulia, if you would be kind enough to let Peter and me know who has the first question, then we'll ask that person to address Peter, please.
I can see that he's got the first question at 8:44.
Okay.
What can we do in respect of leadership education? Yes, please.
Yes, I'm curious to know how we weave all of these initiatives into the fabric of society. So how do we modify leadership education, so to speak, so that these are seen as key or important factors in their role as leaders?
That's a terrific question. I think the first step is awareness of the institutions that provide leadership education. And although mental well-being is a relatively hot topic, it's most of the teaching, as I understand it, doesn't incorporate this range of vulnerability factors and sort of their consequences. And so I think the first thing we need to do is begin to get this comprehensive model of how the condition develops and what is within the scope of leaders and potential leaders to be clarified and sort of distilled this message into something which is A, relevant, and B, accessible to those leaders and potential leaders. But we're really at the beginning of a journey at the moment. We need to codify these messages so that they're really clear and accessible, and then build the awareness such that it becomes part of the mainstream curriculum.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aid. Yulia, who's next?
We don't have direct questions, but I wonder if Stuart would like to join the conversation, seeing that he's created some engagement in the chat.
Good morning. Yes, Stuart Monroe. I think I'd probably class myself as an interested participant because I've got direct experience of what you've described. And Peter, I've got to say, your presentation was excellent. I could resonate with just about every single point through my direct experience. So if we're looking at this from not from an individual perspective, but from a macro perspective, has your research looked at the money aspect? You know, how much money do you think if it's the UK government were to assign to an NHS budget to assist and achieve some of the goals of your projects, have you got to the stage of quantifying what that financial ask would be, or is that further down the track? Thank you.
A very pertinent question, and the honest answer is we're not there yet.
Okay.
The sort of document we're publishing today sets out the three things I've described. So the vulnerability factors and mechanisms, the unmet needs and the projects, and what the different actors need to do, and the fourth thing of the research. Clearly it will take a significant investment, and I don't see this just as being, for example, a UK government thing. I mean, my ideal world would be, we begin to form a global movement on this, because it is a global problem. Having said that, I mean, the economic cost of depression is pretty significant. I mean, if we have 350 million people around the world with the condition, what would be the effect if we could reduce that, the economic and social impact, if we could reduce that to 35 million rather than 350 million? And so, yeah, the honest answer is, I don't know the numbers. I mean, I think it is significant, but I think we do need to make this a global thing, and sort of engage. I mean, particularly in the US, where the condition, I think, is even more severe than it is here. Not least because of the food and nutrition that's so prevalent there.
Indeed, and perhaps another topic, as you say, looking at this from a global perspective, I read some research about which communities in the world are the happiest and the most content. And it was quite interesting research that showed that those communities where they had limited technological advancement and limited physical things in their life, i.e. they lived a very simplistic, sustainable life, were actually happier individuals, because it was a community that they lived within. And I think some of the points that you've brought out here highlight the sort of unintended consequences of social media, which is, we thought social media would help us all to connect, but in actual fact, in many ways, it's making young people become even more isolated, because they have so much mental stimulation from the social media that it overwhelms them to be actually finding out who they are themselves as individuals. So I think you're certainly, I think you're on the right track, Peter, and I commend you for what you've done so far. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Yeah, I suppose that global point that came out in the conversation there, Peter, is something that I was thinking about. You are obviously, you've got to start somewhere, and you started in the UK, quite rightly. But and you mentioned the US. I mean, do you think that the work you're doing, in order that it has global significance, you should actually sort of engage with the UN and use its offices to try and sort of stimulate a wider debate?
That's a really interesting point, Bill. I would love to. I mean, this is just what we have done over the last 5 years, essentially 5 years of analysis and planning. And with this new report, I think we're now at an inflection point where we're moving from analysis and planning to doing. So we want to be doing the projects, but also we want to be engaging sort of society leaders to embrace this and begin to develop a sort of global movement towards less acceptance that depression is a condition that's just going to develop and is ever increasing, to doing something really, really positive and proactive about it. And whether it's the UN and government or governments around the world, I think we need to be playing at this level, because we need to facilitate change, for example, within the health and social care system, but also within the food industry. And we can encourage sort of niche aspects of the food industry to perhaps offer more diversity of plant fibers in the products they offer. But the fact is that the move towards ultra-processed foods is really reducing the nutrition value of foods that people consume, and we need to facilitate sort of a really good discussion with the industry. So it's not just about calories and cost and convenience, but it's about nutrition and actually sustainability. And so if we can get the food system working towards a more sustainable future, where physical and mental well-being through nutrition is a priority, I think that would be a better place. It's going to take much more organizations than our foundation to make that happen.
It is interesting that, I included, most people don't realize that the gut produces so many nutrient precursors for all sorts of functions.
It's amazing.
Not just the one that you're talking about, but I mean, physical ones like your eyes, your organs, all that sort of thing. I mean, and, this ignorance in general of how our food and our gut can influence our physical and well-being is just massively misunderstood. So that's an area that we all need to sort of really perhaps think about how we get that education sort of upfront. Are there any more?
Also, I think we need to recognize that the research doesn't have all the understanding yet. It's big steps have been made over the last decade, but there's still quite a lot more to do in terms of understanding, for example, what diversity of plant fiber is really required to produce those critical chemicals and precursors for both physical and mental well-being.
Yeah. Yulia, I don't think we've got any more questions, have we? Oh, wait a minute, Bernard.
If I may, yeah, it's fascinating research, Peter. Thank you for that. There's a couple of things that concern me, not in the research, but about the whole subject of young people's mental health, and that's that we all here appear to be of an age that have never grown up with social media and the uncontrolled influence of social media. We've also never come through the enforced COVID confinement that young people have come through. And at the same time, the pace of change is rapidly increasing, where we've now got uncontrolled use of AI. And when you've got a target of 2038, we can't even begin to imagine what the world is going to be like in 5 years' time.
Yeah.
And let alone 15. And you think, what can we do now for our young people? Because by the time 2038 comes, this generation of mental health young people, or young people with mental health problems, will be having children of their own.
Indeed.
And maybe they're having children of their own by then. It's quite frightening, isn't it? That we can identify the problem. We can identify some ways of perhaps correcting it, but are we going to be quick enough? And if we're not quick enough, what's the problems going to be by 2038?
That's a great point. I mean, our approach is to try to address to do projects now that are where there is a clear need and the research supports the project, but also to continue and to increase, if possible, the research so that we understand more about the risk factors and mechanisms, but also that we can perhaps look ahead and get a better understanding of what that future state in 10 years, 15 years might be, and begin to preempt those issues so that we get ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're probably aware of global grand challenges and covering it, you know, there are various types of global grand challenge, but Bill, I'm in discussion with Owen O'Sullivan, who's a researcher who's very interested in government policy around innovation and global grand challenges. And we're beginning to think about, well, could we make this a global grand challenge? Because the issues that you raise are absolutely spot on. You know, it's not going to stay still. It's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
But we've got to get ahead of the curve while getting some quick wins, hopefully now.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Bernard. Yeah, I was talking to Harry, he's 25, and that, you know, young people actually comment about, you know, your behavior in terms of your masculinity or femininity, and they've got words for it, you know, I mean, they've got codified words. And, you know, it's just mind-boggling that the world they live in, I mean, it's not just social media, it's face-to-face interactions that put this enormous pressure on young people to behave in certain ways. And if they don't conform, I mean, we didn't conform in my day because I didn't have the right sort of shoes or sweater or something. I mean, something insignificant, but the pressure on them now today is different. And we find it very difficult to understand, I think, because we haven't experienced it. So I think your point's very well made, Bernard. Any other points or questions for Peter? Otherwise, I think I'll wrap it up. Okay. Well, look, first of all, thank you again all for attending and listening to Peter. And thank you, Peter, for a fascinating discourse today about some work that I truly believe is magnificent. And I hope that we can help you to promote it and make sure it's successful. What we will do is we will send you an email tomorrow, and Peter has kindly provided a PDF of his report, which we will attach to the email so you can get that report for yourself. It's being published. I've just seen the social media, Peter. It's being published today by the University of Cambridge as well and promoted on LinkedIn and other social media platforms. We'll also send you a recording link this week so that you can look over the presentation at your leisure. And ultimately, we will put it on our website, as I said at the beginning of the session. We will be having another event in June, and we have your email address, and with your permission, we'll include you in the promotion of that event in due course. So I'd just like to say thank you very much and wish you a good day. Thank you.
Thank you all very much indeed. Yes.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.